Good morning to everyone.
Bonjour. Nous allons commencer. Je vais vous demander de vous asseoir, s'il vous plaît.
Excellent.
Excellences, mesdames et messieurs. Je déclare la deuxième journée de la deuxième partie de la 14e séance de l'Assemblée de l'Agence internationale des énergies renouvelables ouverte. Je m'appelle Rafael Gomez del Giudice, vice-ministre de l'Énergie et des Mines de la République dominicaine, et je souhaiterais commencer par remercier le président de l'Assemblée pour m'avoir invité à présider cette séance plénière. Le président m'a demandé de vous informer, chers délégués, que la séance plénière est tout à fait fonctionnelle aujourd'hui, en incluant l'interprétation, les vidéos, le son et tout. Nous aimerions remercier toutes les personnes présentes pour leur compréhension hier et pour la première séance de l'Assemblée hier qui a été très positive malgré les problèmes et les limitations qu'il y a eu dues à la faute d'interprétation. J'invite les membres de l'Assemblée à se pencher sur le point 11 de l'ordre du jour, l'accélération et le développement de projets d'énergie renouvelable bankable et la plateforme de l'IRENA pour la transition globale. Vous avez devant vous le document sous le même titre, document A barre 14 barre BN barre 2. Cette séance plénière va se pencher sur les initiatives de facilitation de projets innovatrices de l'IRENA, sur les objectifs, les résultats obtenus. Elle va ouvrir un espace de débat sur les défis et sur les histoires à succès et les investissements envers la transition énergétique pour atteindre les objectifs de développement durable. Et aussi, ça va être un espace pour que les partenaires de l'IRENA puissent analyser l'évolution des outils et des plateformes et qui ont été mis en place et leur impact en réduisant les barrières et en accélérant les investissements. Je souhaiterais inviter le directeur général de nous offrir ces remarques liminaires. Merci, Monsieur le Vice-président, chers délégués, Mesdames et Messieurs, bonjour. Je
working overnight to make possible to come to the normal life of our General Assembly. So thank to them, also thank to my people that has been working tirelessly to get this done. And thank to you to be back in this room today. When I was elected Director General of IRENA in 2019, I engaged myself in trying to work for having the agency closer to action. For this reason, I propose and you agree to create a new project facilitation division in the agency. And in 4 years, we have been able to create 2 successful platforms that we are opening and will make the difference in the pathway to tripling renewable installed capacity by 2030. IRENA has built upon early success and lessons to build new focus focused interventions through technical assistance and capacity building, together with facilitating access to finance through these two flagship initiatives. The Climate Investment Platform is mandated to mobilize capital to accelerate the scale of renewable energy technologies to meet national determined contribution and sustainable development goals compliance in developing countries. To date, 5 projects have reached final close in Albania, Benin, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Nigeria. Complementing the CIP, the Energy Transition Accelerating Financing Platform, ETAF, is an inclusive, multi-stakeholder climate finance platform created to advance the global energy transition by supporting the realization of renewable energy projects. ETAF aims to accelerate energy transition by directing finance into renewable energy projects in developing countries. By COP28, the ETAF assigned 13 strategic partners, which together made a pledge of $4 billion of finance toward renewables. I think that this number is more or less the pledge for the replacement of the Green Climate Fund. So our people think that this platform is relevant. The platform has attracted projects of over 10 gigawatts capacity in its first year of operation and has already facilitated the installation of 1 gigawatt across 3 projects in Uzbekistan. As new ambitions are being realized, the ETAF targets have been revised to reach at least $5 billion in funding and to support gigawatts of new project deployment by 2030. Through these platforms, IRENA is fulfilling a transformative role in supporting climate action through access to technical assistance, project finance, and the risk instrument for any transition project for our membership. But let me be clear, we'll succeed in this endeavor only by working together. Each member country represented here is encouraged to explore the available tools, reach out to our experts, and start discussions that will transform into ideas and can manifest into transformative projects aimed at accelerating the much-needed energy transition. The IRENA Secretariat team remains at your disposal to provide further detailed information on both initiatives and any other facets of our work related to project facilitation. So please don't hesitate to contact our people. The upcoming session will discuss country and regional challenges impeding project development and deployment. It will propose ways and means to overcome these challenges and hence benefit from available local, regional, and international energy transition financing. Thank you very much for your attention. Back to you, dear Mr. Vice President.
Thank you, Director General, for your remark. And now invite Her Excellency Ms. Kadri Simon, Commissioner for Energy at the European Commission, to deliver her keynote address.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a pleasure to address you all today. In public discourse, the tendency is to talk about the energy transition in terms of targets and numbers. And of course, these are important aspects. But ultimately, what the energy transition boils down to is projects making a difference for planet and people. Large projects like wind farms, smaller scale projects like rooftop solar, projects that are bankable, that need backing from investors. Over the past few years, EU energy transition has leapt forward at a pace of no one had predicted. Driving this acceleration is a strong political push. In the EU, it began already 5 years ago, in 2019, under the European Green Deal. And it intensified in 2022 as a result of the unjustified and illegal war that Russia launched against Ukraine and the urgent need to wean ourselves in Europe off from Russian fossil fuels. And it will continue as we enter the next phase of the energy transition focused on competitiveness. To ensure the energy transition becomes a reality on the ground, renewable energy projects need to be more profitable and bankable. And with this in mind, the EU has focused on 3 dimensions. First, we have simplified and clarified the regulatory framework. This is key. By cutting red tape and tackling administrative bottlenecks, investments will flow more quickly. The EU has taken action with new legislation and the exchange of good practices. A new law sets clear time limits for permit granting procedures. It mandates a single contact point for applicants to the phase out of paper-based communication. It also introduces a more strategic approach to spatial planning. For example, it designates areas particularly suitable for projects where they can benefit from lighter procedures or even environmental assessments. And this can be, for example, areas around motorways, industrial sites, or degraded land that cannot be used for other purposes. The second essential success factor is to give developers, off-takers, and manufacturers a clearer picture of the project pipeline and make the business environment more predictable. This allows them to better plan future investments. The recent reform of the EU's electricity market addresses this by making broader use of long-term contracts for clean power production. When public support is involved, a two-way contract for difference gives the developer more stability while ensuring that the state can receive compensation when prices are extremely high. We also will give developers and investors a clearer picture by requiring all EU countries to publish a calendar of their future renewable auctions, compiled in a EU-wide tool. For raising more private investment, power purchase agreements will ensure that off-takers have access to guarantees to cover long-term contracts. The European Investment Bank also recently put in place a guarantee mechanism, which will work as a de-risking scheme for wind turbine manufacturers. And finally, delivering the clean energy transition on the ground demands huge investments and reform, both of which the EU is delivering on. Under the REPowerEU plan to strengthen energy sovereignty and fast forward the energy transition, we are mobilizing close to 300 billion euros. The plan taps into EU funding to finance investments in the clean energy transition. It also explores innovative financing mechanisms such as public-private partnerships, green bonds, and investment platforms to attract private sector investment and mobilize additional funding for energy transition projects. A lot of the investment being dispersed hinges on EU member states putting in place reforms. And this is critical. These reforms will have a transformational impact on the energy system and accelerate renewables deployment in the short term. Ladies and gentlemen, all this to say that the EU will continue doing all it can to get renewable energy projects off the ground, each and every project being a critical piece of our clean energy transition puzzle. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Svensson. During the plenary session, we will hear insight from high-level panels of the speaker on the subject matter. This discussion will be moderated by Mr. John Defterios, visiting professor of business at New York University of Abu Dhabi, former emergency market editor and anchor CNN, followed by member intervention. Mr. Simpson, you have the word.
Thank you again, Mr. Gomez. Nice to see you again. Director General, thanks for the invitation to do this very important session, and good morning. It's terrific to do this session, as Her Excellency Kadri Simpson was talking about, accelerating the development of bankable renewable energy projects. I had the honor to do this at COP28 in a smaller session, and it was impressive how this deployment has taken on its own life, if you will, particularly in the developing world. During our session of the geopolitics of energy, we talked about how to get funding in to South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia, and this is a key tool in which to do so. Our world stands at a critical juncture in the energy transition, where the push for renewable energy is not just about environmental stewardship, but also about economic innovation and sustainability. Today, we're focusing on leveraging IRENA's initiatives, like the Climate Investment Platform and the Energy Transition Accelerator Financing Platform. That's why it has the acronym that we have today. We are esteemed to have a fantastic panel to look at how do we develop more bankable projects, and it's got phenomenal representation going from the east to west and from the north to south. I'll introduce the panelists first, and then we'll get a briefing from the program's director. I'll be sitting on the far left if you're facing the stage, so occupy the second seat forward. His Excellency Vince Henderson is the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Business, Trade, and Energy for Dominica. Thanks very much, Vince. We'll give him a warm welcome. Thank you. Anna Schifsberg is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for the USA, with a major focus, of course, on energy and energy security. Anna, please. Thanks very much. His Excellency Davis Chirchir is the Cabinet Secretary of Energy for the wonderful state of Kenya. Thank you, David. Thank you very much. Dite Jewel Jorgensen is the Director General for Energy at the European Commission, working very closely with Ms. Simpson. Nice to see you, Dite. And His Excellency Mr. Haptama Etefa Goleta is the Minister of Water and Energy from the wonderful state of Ethiopia, and we'll keep that microphone on you. Thank you very much. It's a great honor to collaborate again with IRENA. I think this is my 12th year within the organization, and a pleasure to do the General Assembly. I hold a candle out to the gentleman who lives a great passion for his program. We've done a lot of preliminary discussions. He brings that same energy to COP28 and here at the General Assembly. Can we give a warm welcome to Ahmed Badr, who's going to do the briefing for us. Thanks very much, Ahmed.
Thank you very much, John, for your introduction, and it's given me a pleasure to be with you today. I'm trying to be very brief to give the whole space for the distinguished panelists and also to all member states' contributions. So I was advised by our communication team that the best way to communicate what is the situation or the global outlook for the investment and how can we speed up energy transition is mainly to give a storytelling. So we had to consult with several professors, including John himself, but also I'm referring here to Professor Michael Porter from the United States, who basically said that it's very important to highlight what is exactly the comprehensive paradox. That's exactly the definition that we agreed here in IRENA, that it's a comprehensive paradox to say, what is it about bankable projects? Is that really about cost of capital or affordable cost of capital or the conducive environment to attract foreign direct investment? That's really the important questions that we would like to highlight. To go for. Yes, that's exactly one of the very important slides that we had it in our last World Energy Transition Outlook. And you can see that clearly it's not only about
That should be up.
finance. Finance is always there. Money is always there. What we had got, not only from multilateral development banks, from the key players like United States, Treasury there, or from European Commission, European Investment Bank, or other institutions, that money is always there. It's about who's going to access it and under what condition. That's really very important to highlight. So is that about partnership? And last of which, before moving to the next slide, within our few minutes to present it, is that we had a discussion also with the climate envoy, who's the climate champion for COP27, Dr. Mahmoud Mohyiddin, who also highlighted that the cost of capital, as mentioned, I also discussed yesterday with Commissioner Simpson was there, is not affordable to most of the developing countries. That's really one of the main stumbling blocks. So it's about partnership together with finance and also ensuring that the supply chain is really able to provide needed finance, specifically if you talk about green hydrogen. From ITAF, basically, we had convened about more than a dozen of MDBs. We have World Bank, represented by MIG and IFC. We have also other key partners from Europe, like EBRD, and all over the world, basically Islamic Development Bank. I don't want to count the 13, but they are all together. And for sure, the genuine partners who initiated the initiative with us is basically Abu Dhabi Fund for Development, together with other institutions from United Arab Emirates, like Emirates Development Bank, and for sure, Masdar, representing the foreign direct investors. To answer this question, let me tell you what we had to do globally. And from here, I will start to say what is the challenge, as I represented by the 3 key points I mentioned in my first slide. We had supported over the past 4 years since we established both CIP and ITAF, as Francesco mentioned in his presentation, that more than 100 countries. We provided needed technical assistance to bring projects into bankability level in order to attract the banks and the foreign direct investors. And here is the situation. We had more than 4 gigawatts of projects ready to be financed, but only who is ready, financed, and financially closed is 1 gigawatt, 1,000 megawatt, and the remaining 3,000 megawatt plus is really still in the pipeline. Why is that? Several factors. And I would like to highlight that so that John can moderate the session based on it. Number 1, the cost of capital. I believe that Minister Henderson, I had to work with him over the past year in partnership with the United States. And the cost of capital is really one of the issues, meaning that the money is there, but the cost for payback is not affordable up to the level that basically developing countries, including small island developing states, could do. And that's mentioned yesterday from the Minister of Barbados. I'm just referring to what discussed yesterday morning onto this. The other barriers is about de-risking projects. It's not only about currency exchange, but it's also about construction risk, and some of which in some countries, there is also what we call it war risk, not only geopolitical risk. So mitigation of risks for projects, specifically for renewable energy, along technology, stability, and maturity is one of the barriers that we need to look. Plus, for sure, the policies that most of the countries are not fitting with this. For all of these together, when we handle any project, we have to look at all of this. Just to give you a very important number, and I will leave it again for the hand of John, we have more than 45 types of risks has to be included. If it is compared with depleting resources of oil and gas, it's about 13 risks. So the challenges here are almost more than 3 times. Here, I just would like to summarize 2 important barriers or 2 important elements of the paradoxes that I referred to in my earlier slide, is that there is always a big problem about the project size or the mismatch between availability of funding, the appetite of foreign direct investors, who are representing more than 70% of needed investment for clean energy transition globally, specifically in the developing world. Even in developed world, I have to say that the numbers from our World Energy Transition Outlook saying that even there is still some kind of about 20% mismatch in order to attract foreign direct investors as well as MDBs. But the most important issue I would like to highlight here is that basically about the other political barriers. The government political will is very important. And that's really what we always act on in IRENA, meaning that since the beginning when the DG took office about 5 years, we talked about we have to be demand-driven in order to ensure that the political will is always there. Basically, this is my last slide, that in order for us to mobilize or to put these 5 billion or almost reaching 5 billion investment under ITAF, we have basically to look for how can we articulate the demand? How do we create the demand? Creating the demand has to come also through what we call it smart approach for anticipate or attract investments. And basically, I'm referring to the 4 of the other initiatives that we are doing together. First, about creating new innovative models. And here is, I'm talking about a new partner who's coming to join us under ITAF, which is Africa 50. Africa 50 is a group of about more than 10 countries coming from West Africa specifically, together with about more than 7 central banks. And here is, there will be skin in the game coming from the African countries with their political will to do that for investments in renewable energy in Africa. And that's exactly what we are going to I would leave that also to John to discuss about a new initiative that in IRENA, together with the United States and European partners, specifically Germany and Denmark, we are doing a new EE for what we call it accelerating partnership in renewable energy in Africa, or APRA, that basically Africa 50 is joining us under ITAF to work on this together to put more investment. The other important initiative is about sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF. Sustainable aviation fuel is actually one of the very global important initiatives that we are partnering with the United Nations, ICAO, or International Civil Aviation Association. And yesterday, just only yesterday, we got a communication from the European Commission referring that they also wanted to join this important initiative, where basically under ITAF, we are considering to finance related reservoir for sustainable aviation fuel, as well as partnering with the major aviation operators like Airbus and Boeing in order to provide all needed sustainable aviation fuel and all needed investment. The one before last initiative is actually basically to go for the very important tools that was led over the past decade by European Union, and I believe that Dita will talk about it. It's about energy budget support. Energy budget support, or what we call it sector policy support programs, is very important tool in order for attracting or basically paving the way and clearing up all policy barriers and regulations that can attract more foreign direct investment. That's also a very important initiative. We are still considering that with our funding partners. It's not finally confirmed yet, but just to be very transparent that we are working with our partners on this, specifically EBRD and IFC. The one basically that I will end up with is basically to ensure there is a support all along the project cycle development. And here is, I would like to highlight the important need to continue with the support with our partners for technical assistance and capacity building, specifically for countries that are basically facing a lot of challenges, including geopolitical risk and climate risk. I will stop here, and thank you very much for listening to me. Over to you, John. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A nice round of applause to the program director. I just want to remind our panel, we have 40 minutes starting from now, and we have 5 on the panel. So let's not read statements. I want to go through 2 rounds of questions and then allow it to open up if you want to follow up on each other's comments. I think there's a lot of commonality here. I think if I can start with Dominica, I know you have very ambitious goals for diversification. And I've worked with IRENA even on my course for NYU Abu Dhabi, looking at it as a hub for energy here. And the price tag has gone from $2.8 trillion up to $4.3 trillion a year annually. And if I go granular, South America, Africa, Southeast Asia, they're not getting the bankable projects. So how do you see ITAF working, Your Excellency, to unlock the funding to take that ambition into action, if you will, for Dominica?
Well, thank you very much, John. And Pleasant good morning, everyone. In the case of Dominica, we have made some heavy investments up front. And I will say it is through partnerships, the European Commission, the UK government, the government of New Zealand, and more recently our friends, the government of the United States through the Department of State. IRENA also has come in with technical support and advice. In order to get to that stage of having bankable projects, we had to invest heavily in de-risking. In our case, we are pursuing geothermal. We will have a 10-megawatt plant online by the end of 2025. We signed an agreement with Ormat last December, and we will construct that plant as a first step to moving towards 100% renewable. We already have a head start with 30% of hydro and with some solar, mainly rooftop, not at utility scale. So in order to get there, the key thing was to de-risk. And I think that is the conversation we need to have with our partners. Because in the Caribbean, and I was advised that I could speak for my colleagues in the region, we have some things. They
gave you that mandate?
That's right, that's right. So I think I have earned that. I have been around too long, so I've been saddled with that. But we're pursuing geothermal in the region. We have the potential. 4 of the countries in the Eastern Caribbean have the potential for developing geothermal power. But for that to work, there has to be de-risking upfront. And I think this is where we need to have a serious conversation. But in addition to that, we are in a hurricane belt. And I think most of us here were scared a few days ago when we saw the weather condition here. But that is a reality for us every year. And as we seek to transition to renewable energy, there has to be resilience factored into that. So if we're talking about any meaningful transition, we need to start talking about how do we build resilience into the systems? What type of seeds-appropriate renewable energy technology that we deploy? And what can we do to further develop and make more resilient those that already exist? Now, on top of that, and I hate to pile this stuff up, but that's the reality that we live, we have transmission systems, and in some cases, they're more distribution systems, that are not suitable for accepting renewable energy. Whether it's intermittent, and in the case of geothermal, we need to upgrade significantly in order to evacuate that power from the main area of supply. So these are very significant investments. And I think we need to start having a conversation where we see transmission systems, in this case, as public goods that need to be financed. Now, where do we finance this from? And therefore, there has to be some sort of concessional financing blended with as much technical support as possible to reduce the overall cost to the consumer. Because I was very, very enlightened by the point made by the EU Commissioner. We are not just doing this to meet targets. We're doing this to improve the lives of our people. And if we see energy as a means of development, especially for developing states, there has to be affordability factored into that transition. So we need to consider the key factors. And I have to say, a lot of seeds move ahead, small island developing states move ahead to the transition, hoping that they would make it to their targets without making the necessary investments in the infrastructure, which is a transmission system, either smartening the grid or building grids that could actually carry that power. So that is essentially some of the ideas that I think...
No, they're very good ideas. Actually, there's a great thread for the rest of the panel, so I appreciate that. Let's see if we can unpack that, Anna. I talked about the numbers that we need for deploying, but the minister brought up a very fair point of resilience. The loss and damage fund, I know, was a priority for COP28, and they did unlock a lot of pledges. But it's how do we do a model where the major developed economies can work with the lending institutions, and that you have an ETAF that helps unlock microfinancing to get things moving, that includes modernization of the grid, specific targets for certain energy, and then say, how do we deploy the loss and damage to make sure they can build that sort of resilience that the minister was talking about?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of loss and damage, there's a whole conversation around that is live in terms of what's the most effective way to build out that fund and make sure we're using efficient resources. ETAF has a potential to contribute significantly to building out resilience and mitigation. And how we look at it is it's a tool that brings in partners with a vision. And what I mean by that is we talk about the fact that we've had this great clean energy investment and it's not sitting in the emerging economies. We feel that. So I'll use an example because it's easier to see this as an example. I lead on the investment facilitation pillar for our partnership with the Caribbean to address the climate crisis. And that means actually looking at projects that are coming up through procurement, providing transaction advisory support, and then finding how do these get to financial close. So for example, we've been working with Dominica, with Minister Henderson on the geothermal project, and I called up Ahmed and said, we need players with a vision. We need additional players because we need more de-risking tools and we need to figure out a financial model that is going to be responsible to the region. And to Minister Henderson's point, it has to be affordable. And for that, we need to continue de-risking and we need more players. And so that was when he came in with ETAF and we started to actually look at this project and try and figure out what else is missing? Is there anything else that can be provided? What could this look like?
Interesting. So ETAF is serving mainly as a de-risker, or is it identify the project, approve the project, and then other lenders come off the back?
No, in this case, so ETAF can work in many different ways in different countries. In this case, it was about bringing them in, looking at who's already in there. World Bank was in there. We were helping provide transaction advisory support. A lot of governments are working to see this project through. ETAF was coming in to see, are there other grants that could be provided in additional to financing a model where banks could come in, additional players could come in. Iceland came in and provided capacity support. But we wanted to do this as partners because we're saying geothermal is important for the region. It has a potential to green the island. And we don't want players to just look at financial players at markets in a traditional sense of, oh, do they have a supply chain, a workforce, scale, local banking? Sure, we'll go in. We'll never reach climate goals. We'll never reach energy security goals. We'll never reach energy access goals if we look like that. We need to see the vision. Islands have an incredible potential to boost their economy, to green their islands with these projects. And we need players to come in with that vision, not with the traditional sense of financing. And that's the potential for ETAF, to bring all of the network that Ahmed stood about to the fold and to say how many of you can actually come to the table and help with de-risking, and possibly also look at this differently and look at it as an economy and not just a project.
Excellent. Thanks a lot for handling that. And I think the dovetailing of the messages that Mr. Henderson put out, I think it carries through the entire panel. Mr. Chakir, it's great to have you. And I know you've been blessed with this geothermal power. We heard from Dominica with the same sort of aspirations. How do we apply ETAF to expansion of geothermal, but the ability to roll out other renewable projects in Kenya?
Thank you, John, and good morning, everybody. I think, like Kenya today deploys 50% in its energy mix from geothermal. And you may be aware that Kenya today posts a 6th position in utilization of geothermal worldwide.
I know.
Geothermal is a great baseload in that it's able to dispatch almost 100% of the time, less the time when you're doing maintenance. So we're doing today about 94% dispatch. When you then see geothermal being a very good baseload and having been fully de-risked in terms of what we do to be able to establish the true cost in proper compensation through the risking of the fields and so on and so forth, we are able to use geothermal as a baseload to leverage the other renewables in solar and wind, where the availability factor is very low, and therefore bankability can be a challenge. So by providing proper compensation in terms of cost of capital, return on investment, availability in terms of the plant to make the whole thing bankable, we're able to get number of investors coming in to leverage on the competitiveness on the tariff offered based on the economics of dispatch and feed-in tariff that we are able to provide through the...
Can I follow up with you, Your Excellency? Outside of geothermal, you're not having difficulties raising project money for wind and solar in Kenya then?
I think having almost fully de-risked, there is a long waiting list in Kenya today for both wind and solar. You also may be aware that we developed the largest wind plant in Africa today, from one location dispatching 310 megawatts. And therefore, John, by leveraging and de-risking, ensuring that you provide an economic tariff for a good return on equity, return on investment, provide letters of support from government, you are able to really get in capital coming in. So today we have actually a waiting list on solar, wind, and even geothermal, because the other point as per our least cost power development plan, you also want to develop and dispatch power to the grid that can be off-taken. So you want to match demand and supply, and therefore be able to ensure that you are not generating power that you don't need, and that way you are able to keep the right tariff that can return on the investment, that on the cost of capital.
Okay.
So that way, John, we are able to
Excellent.
Really, yeah.
What a fantastic conversation. So I'd love to, DT, if you can jump in here as Director General and pick up off what the Commissioner said of how do you see the toolbox. We heard Anna's views of how do you bundle with the others and unlock the capital by de-risking. How does this fit into the European Commission toolbox when you look at a country like Dominica or Kenya or Ethiopia to say, let's accelerate the transition on renewables? And there was some time spent on the taxonomy of whether we should be financing new natural gas projects in certain countries in Africa because they sit on some sizable deposits. How do you balance it out to say that renewables should take a priority, we can go off grid, we can have an impact on society, as Minister Chakur had talked about?
Well, thank you very much, John, and thank you very much to Ahmed and the IRENA Secretariat for the excellent work. These platforms are really important to help make financing and investment happen in renewable projects. So the role of IRENA here is absolutely critical. We need this continued well-functioning of the agency to help make it happen. As Commissioner Simpson said in her keynote remarks, there's a lot of progress in Europe. And I think what's interesting about that is not so much what we do, but to what extent can what we do in Europe be used in our partnership with other countries, in our cooperation with IRENA? Are there lessons learned? Are there instruments to help financing and investment happening that we can share with others? And that's what we're trying to do. We have our global gateway where we have about 300 billion euro planned between now and 2027, really focusing on renewable energy. And you say, why renewable energy? There are other energy projects as well. But I think you said it very well. Energy is also about access. Affordable energy is not just a transition. It's about access to energy. It's about development. So it goes beyond the investments themselves and into the question of a fair global transition and sharing that access. I think what you have been doing and investing in Kenya is a very, very good example of that. One of the big challenges we see in relation to investment and financing of renewable energy projects in countries in Africa, for example, is the cost of capital. You mentioned it, Minister. It is very, very high. And the reason for the high capital cost is not that there's a lack of capital. There's plenty of capital out there to be invested and to be invested in renewable energy. So we need to be better. We need to work together at identifying what are then the bottlenecks. One of the things we see is concerns about risks. I think there's a tendency to overestimate the risks. So we need to go in and clarify where we can, help create the stable regulatory frameworks that lowers the perception of risk. And then we need de-risking instruments. And that brings me back to what we've been doing within the European Union, because we have had challenges as well in getting the investments where we need them to go. And we have created a number of de-risking instruments, including with the European Investment Bank. And there are some lessons learned there that we hope to be able to share with global partners to help de-risk investments into renewable energy in Africa, for example, but really in all parts of the world to make it happen. So there are lots of good examples. We've got our investment package with Africa under the Global Gateway. It's 150 billion euro, really aiming to leverage private investments because we need private funds. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. We do that not just the European Commission, but really working as what we call Team Europe. So the European Union and the 27 member states, which is a way of leveraging capital as much as possible, getting as much together for cooperation. And that's both for renewables, it's for interconnectors. We have been part of an interconnector or contributing to an interconnector between Kenya, Tanzania, and Zambia for that integrated market to deliver in a more cost-efficient and more secure way. So again, that affordable energy and access to energy is critical.
Great.
So we will continue our efforts there, including under the IRENA platforms, which really are important to help make it happen and bring these things together.
Great. I'm going to circle back here, too, on de-risking and ESG, particularly for Africa and island states as well, because sometimes ESG screens seem as an excuse why not to deploy money, and I'd love to get the perspectives of the panel on that, so where ETAF can help give some comfort to the institutional investors even. We had Ray Dalio of Bridgewater Associates on a panel at the World Economic Forum this year, and he says there's $200 trillion of private capital and $2 trillion really from the investment banks or the regional development banks and the IMF and World Bank that can help support, but you have a multiplier of 100. So we have to de-risk and give them a reason to deploy, I think is the key point here. I just want to remind our folks in the audience, we don't have a speaker on the stage, so we can hear your conversations, and it's hard for us to hear each other. So if we could limit the volume of the conversations, it would be super helpful for us. Mr. Ntefa, thanks for your patience. Yeah, it's nice to have you. I think it's excellent we have Ethiopia with its large population. It's an incredible emerging market that I covered, obviously, as emerging markets editor for CNN. It's had its success in hydropower that everybody knows about, the geopolitics around hydropower and the region, which is something we can't ignore, the potential for geothermal and bringing in wind energy, of course, has got great potential. So how do you see ETAP supporting it and some of the things that Dite and Anna brought up here to coalesce at a faster pace the lending to see those projects to the stage of production for the Ethiopian people?
Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. Excellencies.
I just have to remind you, we have to go to 2 minutes each, yeah? We only have 10 minutes left for the panel, so please.
Great. Great. As you said, Ethiopia, we have the big potential on hydropower, which is mainly part of the renewable energy, where we had long years experience and a lot has been done. Currently, we are working on modifying the energy mix, mainly on the solar and the wind, how we can really make it somehow balanced. So far, what we have been doing, thanks for development partners like World Bank and FDP, they had really significant role in supporting our power development, which we could connect with our brotherly countries and our neighbors. We also now prepared projects in PPP model, private, public, and partnership model, that will increase the confidence of the private sector so that they can come and work upon that. We do have series of projects that has been prioritized from solar, from wind, and from hydro itself, where people can come and then invest on that area. I think those are the places where the climate investment program or the ETAF can really get interested upon that. The role of IRENA is to create that platform, how really we can sell the ideas, what we have prepared so far that has been done. From the current energy access, 92% is from hydropower, which for sure we can say is green and renewable. And this, I think, makes us more preferable for bankability as well, in terms of climate and in terms of its profitability. Of course, when we think about hydropower, we have to think far, how to sustain, because the climate change will not impact on the hydropower. So the government, especially His Excellency Prime Minister, the last 4 or 5 years, has initiated an idea of green legacy, where we have to treat the catchment, the water body, the dam, life, and so on, are that we are doing. So additional point where we need the CIP and ITAF is where we can go for the off-grids from the solar, from the wind, and even from the geothermal with our Kenyan brothers. Really, we are sharing good experience also from them.
Yeah, it's incredible you said about climate change and impacting hydropower. I never thought about it in that context. We've seen what's happened to the Suez Canal with the water drop, the Panama Canal having its own troubles, geopolitics weighing in on the Red Sea, which you cannot ignore, right, because it's in your neighborhood. So the complexities around the geopolitics of energy while trying to deploy something as a platform or ETF is extremely important. I wanted to jump to the closing question here because we have 6 minutes. So I need interventions of 90 seconds or less, yeah? So I'm going to riff with you, and you heard what we said on the first round. One of the things that I singled out was governance, because we had that conversation yesterday. Why isn't Africa getting more money? Why isn't South America getting more money? And the role of ETAF to help de-risk and governance, I think, is a key issue. I think if you reflect on today's discussion, what do you think is the single next big thing for Dominica, for example, that you need to see happen to have this lending come together and you move at a faster pace? Do you want to take that, Mr. Henderson?
Well, interestingly for us, we have more geothermal potential than we can utilize, even if we were to grow by a factor of, say, 10% every year for the next 10 years. So we have a great resource. The next step is, how do we utilize that resource? How do we take advantage of the fact that we, within our neighborhood, can provide power to other countries? So we're talking about scaling up. I think it's really scaling up, but the risking part is very important. So we come back to that all the time. But we could scale up. We could consider the development of green hydrogen as a great potential. And as a matter of fact, we already have been moving towards that direction so that we could actually start producing green hydrogen in the near future.
Can we scale down the price of green hydrogen? It almost seems like it's the life cycle of solar and wind, where it started high, the competition came, and then the prices came down.
Precisely. So that is where the challenge is. And this is where I believe that, the financing, the risking, the bringing the partners together will become necessary. But I think also IRENA needs to consider further engagement of development partners within the region. So the Caribbean Development Bank, for example, our regional institutions, we could start bringing in more of the resources. I heard my friend Ahmed spoke about the challenge that they have. If a target of 5 gigawatts only be able to do 1, I believe there might be an opportunity to start talking more regional type of approaches in partnership with IRENA to see how we could more quickly deploy those resources. So I think it has to be a conversation among how do we bring more regional partners to participate in this. We have seen it with, for example, the Inter-American Development Bank working together with the Caribbean Development Bank. We have seen the World Bank being more willing to partner with some of our regional institutions, and the World Bank has been an excellent partner for Dominica over the last decade, developing geothermal. So we need to start having that conversation, and finally, interconnecting the region.
It's really interesting.
That's
not part of the conversation, so the regional approach would work much better.
That's right, because we can interconnect. We are not that far, unfortunately. It's not as the case of the Pacific. Our islands are more closely aligned, and we have regional institutions as well that could facilitate that. So there has to be a conversation now on how do we interconnect these very small islands to scale up actual production, because we're really talking about small systems. And I believe that if we have that type of regional view to connectivity, to institutions participating in the deployment, we can be able to see much more happening in the Caribbean with regards to...
Great, thanks. I don't mean to cut you short, it's just that we have to finish up in 5 minutes here, so I'll ask for the focus, and I'll come back to you. Minister Chakir, the one thing that you need to see from an ETAF to help deployment at a faster pace. I mean, Kenya's quite an incredible economy. What's needed here is it grid modernization that you'd like to see, connecting to deployment of grants to bring in other renewable assets? 1 minute, please, yeah?
Thank you again, John. You talk about grid monetization. I think what we've done and what we realize we need to do with a fully unbundled energy delivery system from generation, transmission, and offtake. We are working very closely with IRENA, with everybody to see how particularly the transmission can be accelerated. And like my brothers talked about interconnection, we are fully interconnected with Ethiopia on a 500 DC line, 200 megawatts. We are shortly going to be fully interconnected with Tanzania, therefore to Zambia and all the way to South Africa in terms of power trade. And we are finalizing and working on interconnection with Uganda, our neighbor. But with respect to grid monetization, we are holding so much capital on grid on government balance sheets. And we think with the regulations like wheeling regulations, which has been built through our legislative framework, to be able to make transmission networks create appetite for the private sector to come in through PPP. We then are able to provide a tariff, a wheeling tariff, and make transmission as attractive as power generation, where you can invest and earn on either capacity on or the capacity of electrons that you push through the network. So, like again, my brother said, we need scale, and we realize our economies cannot offtake through the least cost power development. And therefore, looking at green minerals and value addition, and particularly what I've just mentioned in power trade with the region, we are able to generate power, work with our neighbors, and be able to wheel power to market where we can do value addition of minerals in the Congo or in Burundi, and then so on and so forth. And that way we are able to scale and not just develop power for our own use as a country, because our economies are small, be able to go to the next step of green hydrogen, value addition in green minerals, and create value, because in terms of abundance of renewable energy, we really have that abundant renewable energy in Africa. And unless we scale and work in value addition, we'll not be able to move to that next step. So working with platforms like IRENA, participating in this kind of conferences, sharing knowledge, we should be able to overcome and move forward together quickly.
Okay, thanks very much. We only have I'm out of time, actually, so I'm going to ask the minister to weigh in and then have Anna and Dite close out on the single priority, the single priority to make this, to move ahead. This is what happens when you start a panel 10 minutes late. So I got little birdies speaking in my ear telling me to wrap it up. At CNN, they just would take you off the air. They don't give you the flexibility. Mr. Chakir, I love this idea of African collaboration. I know the percentage of money that's going into Ethiopia, but the one priority for you coming out of this arena for ETAF, one priority, 30 seconds.
Yeah, priority number one is upgrading the systems of our distribution lines, which have been very old and need some kind of updates, is where we really need that, because our current hydropower, we are good in generating the power, but on distributions we have issues that need to be addressed and then supported. When we support that, that is priority number one and a very critical one.
Great, thank you for playing along here on time frames. You cleared that CNN rule, so you stay on the air. I think I'd have to work with you in the coaching afterwards, because although you're extremely articulate, Mr. Anderson. Anna, Dite, I'd love to have you cover the G in governance, because we had this conversation yesterday. Why isn't there more money going into these developing markets that offer big potential? Kenya, Ethiopia itself, the small island states, if you bundle them, they offer that sort of potential. How do you de-risk this most effectively, and where does ETAF fit in?
I think in general, we need smarter blended finance. Right across the board, we need smarter blended finance, because for most of the DFIs and for all the public institutions, we have strong ESG standards built into project criteria. So the idea is when they're involved, there already is a de-risking on the governance component that can come in. The problem is it hasn't been leveraged well, and which it's the reason that from our Treasury Department, we spent a lot of time talking about MDB reform and actually increasing the lending capacity. That is very important. We've gone from a space of we've used this amount of money for traditional loans that just has money sitting. It's inefficient. It does not leverage. We needed to securitize. We need hybrid capital. We need to use insurers for credit guarantees separate from possibly political risk insurance. We need to fully rethink of crisis response funding, and we need money to be able recycled and to use the private capital the way it's meant to be used. There's a lot of different private capital, so we need to be effective about where it comes in and how, and where the DFIs and MDBs are using them to bring in the private side. And so already there are measures on the table that would open up about $200 billion over 10 years, just from the reforms that are being reviewed right now on the MDB side. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of potential without changing the credit ratings of the MDBs, and same for the other institutions. We're putting in additional money in different funds, working with Denmark, working with Nordic countries, to be able to put in credit risk guarantees, to be able to put in blended finance funds to get money out there.
It's good. I saw a lot of progress at COP28 because it was given priority. DT, do you want to wrap on how do we bring in the G in governance so it's not used as an excuse not to invest, and where the Commission, the EBRD, the ADB, Latin American development banks can actually, as Anna suggests, move faster to bring the private sector in? Can you wrap that?
Thank you. So many good points have been made, and so I'll try not to repeat all the good points, but rather try to point to a different aspect of it that needs to be integrated into the de-risking efforts. We need to look at it as a system approach. Renewable energy requires a whole system. It requires scale. It requires regional cooperation. It requires grids. It requires storage. And actually, your points about hydropower made me think of storage. Yep. Because hydropower has this beauty of both being an energy provider, but also providing significant storage. And so in order to get the investments going, you need the regulatory predictability, but you also need the whole system. Storage and energy security can be about the interconnectors that you pointed to. It can be about the storage in your hydropower system. It can be many different things in different systems, but you need a system. So that framework, we have to help each other draw from the lessons from across the world.
Thank you very, very much. It's interesting because one thing we did clear at COP28 is not one size fits all. So hopefully within that troika structure as well, as you say, to have a system that can look at a country individually and then say, how do we plug it in regionally would be a huge help. I'd be very formal and mention each one of your names again, but I do need to close. Thanks a lot for playing along and being very succinct, especially on that second round, which was a challenge. Number one, can we give a nice round of applause to the panelists, and we'll bring the Vice President back up. We'll bring you down. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Gomez, thanks. Sorry we had to use that extra 5 minutes, but I think it was very well worth it. If you can do a quick one while he's talking. Thanks. We'll do a quick group detail. We'll do a quick. Mr. Gomez, will you do the introductions for Mr. Raul to do his speech? Yeah? Thank you very much.
Thank John. Really, many thanks for guiding this discussion. Very interesting. And let me express my sincerest gratitude to all members of the panel for the keynote speaker. I now open the floor for intervention from delegation in order to ensure the higher level of engagement and participation. Speakers are invited to limit their intervention in plenary on 3 minutes, please, because we are short on time. Please, Egit.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you, Chair. And first, I would like to thank all member states, and I would like to thank IRENA Director General and all staff for all efforts to support development of renewable energy all over the world. But if you please, if I can deliver my intervention in Arabic, please, you can use the headset please. مداخلتي الحقيقة بقولها من واقع ان مصر بتقوم بدور الكو-فاسيليتيتور لتيسير المناقشات اللي بتتم بين كل الدول الأعضاء بهدف الحصول وبهدف حشد التمويلات للطاقة المتجددة. وأنا بشكر في هذا الإطار أيرينا لتكليف مصر مع دولة النمسا الشقيقة لقيادة هذه المناقشات. الحقيقة تم عقد عدد من الاجتماعات قادتها مصر والنمسا، وتم الوصول إلى عدد من التوصيات تم رفعها لسكرتارية الأيرينا. وفي هذا الصدد أنا بؤكد حرص مصر على استمرار هذه المناقشات للوصول إلى مستخلصات نهائية يمكن دعم قضية حشد التمويل. أود هنا أن أؤكد من وجهة نظر مصر أن موضوع التحول في الطاقة العالمي موضوع غاية في الأهمية. أولا لتحقيق أهداف باريس لحماية الكوكب والحفاظ على الموارد في كل دولة وكل منطقة، لكن من الأهمية أن احنا يجب أن احنا نؤكد على أنه يكون تحول عادل في الطاقة يراعي ظروف كل منطقة وكل ظروف كل قارة، وخاصة الدول الأفريقية والدول الأقل دخلا والأقل نمو. أيضا يجب أن يراعي الموارد المتاحة في كل منطقة. الحقيقة اتفاق باريس لما حدد هدف 1.5 درجة مئوية وضع شروط لتحقيق هذا الهدف ووسائل للتنفيذ، على رأسها تدبير التمويل اللازم لذلك. وتم إنشاء عدد من مؤسسات التمويل الدولية، على رأسها الجرين كلايمت فاند اللي كان بيستهدف حشد حوالي 100 مليار يورو أو 100 مليار دولار سنويا، لكن للأسف أن الواقع على الأرض حاليا لا يعكس ذلك. فنحن بحاجة شديدة النهاردة أن احنا نعيد تقييم الموقف ونرى ما هي التمويلات المتاحة حتى نستطيع تحقيق هذا الهدف. في مصر حالة احنا استطعنا على خلفية الدعم السياسي وعلى خلفية السياسات والقواعد اللي تم وضعها في مصر خلال ال7 سنوات الماضية ان احنا نصل الى الطاقة المتجددة حاليا الى حوالي 20% من الحمل الأقصى، ولدينا هدف نصل إلى 42%. كل هذا الإنجاز الذي تم كان اعتماد على موارد ذاتية خاصة بالدولة المصرية دون الحصول على تمويلات كبيرة من المجتمع الدولي. ده يعني إن احنا في حالة الحصول على دعم دولي أكثر وخاصة في مجال التمويل ودعم التكنولوجي وخلافه، إن احنا نستطيع تحقيق الهدف ونساهم في تحقيق الهدف الدولي في هذا الإنجاز. لابد ان احنا في هذا الإطار نؤكد على ان لابد ان يكون الحوار ما بين الدول المتقدمة والدول النامية من واقع الوين وين سيتويشن، عندما يكون الدول المتقدمة تراعي ظروف الدول الأفريقية وتراعي ظروف الدول النامية، نستطيع تحقيق هذه الأهداف اللي بنسعى جميعا إلى تحقيقها. مرة ثانية بحب أن أؤكد أن احنا إن شاء الله مستمرين في تحقيق في تدبير وتيسير التسهيلات. وأضع بس كلمة مداخلة مع زميلي عضو رفض المصري.
Thank you so much. أود التأكيد على الموقف المصري من موضوع التمويلات اللازمة للدول الأفريقية الذي تبنته مصر خلال مؤتمر الأطراف في شرم الشيخ 27 وتم التأكيد عليه خلال مؤتمر كوب 28 في دولة الإمارات العربية الشقيقة، ألا وهو يجب زيادة مصادر التمويل سواء من ناحية الحجم وأيضا شروط وإجراءات النفاذ إلى هذا التمويل، ثم وضع الإجراءات اللازمة لتيسير الضمانات الحكومية وبالذات للدول النامية والدول الأفريقية حتى يستطيع القطاع الخاص للنفاذ إلى تنفيذ المشروعات الحقيقية للطاقات المتجددة في الدول الأفريقية وتحقيق النمو، ذلك بجانب توفير المنح، وأؤكد على المنح للدول الأفريقية لتنفيذ البنية الأساسية اللازمة لدخول القطاع الخاص لتنفيذ مشروعات الطاقات المتجددة وصولا إلى أهداف التحول الطاقي العادل الذي أكد عليه زميلي. شكرا جزيلا.
Okay, thank you. If any more, nobody want to talk, I want to pass to the reflection. Then after I will pass the word to Mr. De Frecchio. Please use your translator. Oh, sorry, there was Guinea want to talk, please. Sorry.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Je veux remercier vraiment le vice-président pour la direction de cette session matinale et grand merci à monsieur le modérateur ainsi qu'aux différents intervenants dans le panel passé. Et j'aimerais attirer votre attention sur un fait essentiel. S'il y a des montants qui sont prévus pour les énergies vertes, pour tendre vers la transition énergétique le plus rapidement que possible, et qu'il est remarqué et su de toutes et de tous que l'Afrique ainsi que certains pays en voie de développement n'ont accès qu'à une toute petite partie de ces montants. Je me dis qu'il faut mettre l'accent sur le renforcement de capacités. Vous parlez de projets bancables. Vous parlez de méthodologie d'avoir accès à ces fonds. Il faut commencer par la base, c'est-à-dire renforcer les capacités, non seulement sur le plan gouvernemental, avec par exemple les premiers ministres, les ministres des Finances, pour savoir quel est le circuit financier qu'il faut exactement respecter, mais aussi au niveau technique, avec les ministres en charge de l'énergie, mais aussi les points focaux de IRENA. C'est sur ce point que je voulais attirer l'attention. Du reste, je pense que la transition énergétique peut être accélérée en ne laissant personne de côté. Merci.
Okay, thank you, Guinea. Okay. No more? Okay. Now we will call Mr. Raúl Pelico, Director of Knowledge Policy Framework Center. Then after that, we're going to make the reflection because we are short in time. We have to start the next panel.
Presidente. Good morning, Your Excellencies, esteemed panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me express my deepest gratitude to everybody who participated in the session today about accelerating the development of bankable renewable energy projects. As I start my tenure as Director of the Knowledge, Policy and Finance Center, your insights will guide IRENA's thought leadership and also investment stewardship. As mentioned in the session, more efforts are needed to scale up investments globally, especially in countries that are most in need of renewable energy deployment, particularly in the Global South. In 2023, energy transition-related investments exceeded $2 trillion, with emerging markets and development economies accounting for half of that. However, when we exclude China from that figure, it turns out that only 14% of those investments went to developing countries. On a per capita basis, advanced economies making up 14% of the world's population attracted 5 times more investment per capita than 154 countries, excluding China, that make up 2/3 of the world's population. When it comes to least developed countries, these countries attracted less than 1% of investments, on average between 2013 and 2020. And the disparity of renewable energy financing keeps increasing. Renewable energy investment per capita in Europe and North America was about 22 times higher than in sub-Saharan Africa in 2015. In 2021, this figure is 41 times higher for Europe and 57 times higher for North America compared to sub-Saharan Africa. This is really far from a just and inclusive energy transition. In that spirit, today we explore innovative solutions to overcome the barriers, and this is where IRENA's platforms, such as the Climate Investment Platform and the Energy Transition Accelerator Financing Platform, are examples of some of the tools that can help us make renewable energy projects investment-ready in developing countries. We have seen a critical role for public financing here in moving projects towards bankability. However, the focus on bankability also leaves many countries behind, particularly because the risks perceived are really holding back the private sector. So really, we need a new paradigm when we think about bankability, one that goes beyond bankability. And at IRENA, we're starting to use a term that we call impactability, one that looks at the benefits that go beyond financial indications. We will continue to analyze the potential for the way forward at IRENA and advocating for an increased focus on project impactability and not only bankability. At IRENA, we look forward to partner with all of you in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perico. Very good reflection. I would like to say thank to all for the participation on the assembly. And with this, we concluded the consideration of Agenda 11. Thank you to all.